Welcome to Wednesday Night Reviews.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wednesday Night Reviews. Once again, I'm your host, Conrad, and today I wanted to share with you guys Klaus, the New Adventures of Santa Claus. So, Klaus is actually one of my favorite characters. This was obviously this collection released by Boom Studios just this year, and I absolutely love it. Written by the wonderful, talented, and possibly crazy Grant Morrison, and drawn by Mora, who is quickly becoming probably one of my favorite artists, and I suspect, if possible, I'm going to have some of his art up here at some point. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Klaus, the New Adventures of Santa Claus. This book, unlike its predecessor, so the original Klaus was a 6-issue miniseries, this one is actually 2 stories. They're both really fun, and I quite enjoy them. So the first is Klaus and the Witch of Winter. So this story is a mashup of classic folklore with modern repercussions. It takes the classic character of Klaus and this reimagination, which sort of combines St. Nicholas with Sinterklaas and many, many, many other iterations, and we actually get to see them. And probably my favorite shot in this whole book, which I am going to quickly find for you, ladies and gentlemen, which is right here. So this is a wicked drawing from, of course, Mora, with Grant Morrison's guidance, of all the versions of Santa Claus, Sinterklaas, Father Christmas, and many, many, many more, all lined up in their different iterations. And of course, in the middle, Klaus, just plain old Klaus, or Father Klaus, or Santa Claus. So this story is truly awesome. It has to do with, of course, the Winter Witch, the idea of winter, the winter solstice, cold, ice, freezing as evil magic, and what that Winter Witch does. So she abducts 2 children in order to sort of start taking over the world and be evil and do all nasty things. And of course, Klaus, our dashing bearded hero, a much younger man that he appears in most modern legend, is of course drawn in by the father, who notices his kids are gone. And we meet his father, who's dressed up as Santa Claus, of course, to surprise his children, but then is surprised when, hey, my kids are missing. So Klaus shows up to save them, and he jets off to fight the Winter Witch. Now, what I think is interesting about this story isn't just that, oh, look, there's a bad guy, I'm going to go punch the bad guy in the face. Like a good Christmas story should, it reminds you what Christmas is about. It's about being together, helping your family when you can, and that's actually how the Winter Witch is defeated. So we do get to meet Geppetto, the guy who created Pinocchio, who appears to have been trained by Father Claus, which I think is probably the coolest little thing. So Grant Morrison in this story is building his world out and making it much more rich for us. And of course, with Geppetto's help, the Winter Witch is able to make an army, with which Klaus dispatches quickly with a tree. A literal tree. He picks it up out of the ground and hits them. It's fun. And as the story sort of continues, obviously we meet the Winter Witch, and we learn also that the forces of evil, as presented in folklore or legend or myth often, aren't just an evil character. Much like Maleficent in the recent I'm feeling old now, movie, the evil characters aren't always evil. It's sometimes a cyclical nature. And by the end of the story, we meet truly the Winter Witch and what she is, and all those issues get resolved. And the story just sort of helps us all, once again, remember what Christmas is about. Family, being together, not shopping, Coca-Cola, and money. So the second story or chunk of this book, as mentioned, is Klaus and the Crisis in Xmas-VIlla, which I think is just the greatest weird story ever. So while the first portion of this book was clearly folklore meets modern times, this is sci-fi, and taking Klaus into the sci-fi realm. Once again, just a great show of how Grant Morrison is extremely flexible in his mind and his characters. So Crisis in Xmas-VIlla follows a family of annoyingly young, loud children in the back of their car as they go basically on a little Christmas time adventure with their parents and their station wagon on August 8th of 85. And they go missing when they roll into Xmas-VIlla, which I'm just going to show you this awesome shot. And please do pay attention to the Pola-Cola sign. So this is Xmas-VIlla, the city where everyone is Santa all the time, 24/7, 365. And we quickly learn that this city was entirely founded by the Pola-Cola company, which of course is just a shot back to Coca-Cola and how they modernized the look of Santa that we know now. But of course, this is not just some sinister, weird little town where everyone likes to dress up as Santa. Quickly, the family is stolen. The father is brainwashed, and he is dressed as a Santa. The mother is sent to work in a factory, and the children are captured by an army of Santa Clauses led by none other than an evil version of Klaus from a dark version of our universe. So Klaus gets called and he rushes off to go save the world, and of course the children, because Santa Claus, for those of you who don't know, is actually the saint of children and sailors. And throughout this story, we get to basically see how, in modern contexts, since, well, probably the founding of Coca-Cola, to be honest, our modern take on Christmas is shopping, big business, money, advertisements, and jingles. And it is. Think Black Friday, think everything like that. I mean, there are sales now that last longer than people's putting out of decorations. And I did want to put a shout out. Thank you to those who decorate for Christmas and say Merry Christmas and all that stuff. Even as a non-Christian, it's just nice to celebrate the time of year with whoever it is, wherever you are. So Merry Christmas to you out there. Now that being said, of course, Klaus cannot stand for these alien otherworlders stealing children and basically using them to harvest imagination. So he goes and he fights the dark version of himself, which I think is the coolest anti-heroization of Klaus that they could have come up with, and because he's similar enough and yet extremely dark and just a violent looking dude. He almost reminds me of Lobo with a little bit of Spawn in him to just fight off that Christmas cheer. And they have it out. And once again, while Klaus is most certainly important to this story, and without him, most certainly everyone would have been in peril, we get to see more and more people that are aligned with Klaus in his world and in his universe. Once again, Grant Morrison, that extreme flexibility and deep research digging into the folklore of Santa Claus, and whether that's the Christian iteration or other cultures' versions of him, Morrison finds a way of bringing them all together and making this really cool network of, I don't want to say superheroes because they're not, they're folklore, but of these characters, these legends and myths. And of course, I mean, if we're going to talk about the writing, we must speak about the awesome art, because without the artist Dan Mora, none of this would be presented visually, because I've never known Morrison to draw a book in his life, I don't think. So Dan Mora's art in this changes between the two stories. One has a more rustic feel, where the other has a more polished, finished feel of like the 20th century computer technology in the writing. But at all times, they are high detailed, they are colorful, and just great to look at. So the colors used throughout these books are what I think draw me to them. So normally when you think of Santa Claus, you would think of maybe a red sleigh or the reindeer, and they're all pretty much, it's always designed like that. But of course, Morrison here, going as crazy as he is with all the folklore and legend, and Mora bringing all this to life, creates quite possibly the coolest Santa sleigh on the planet, which is just wacky looking. So ladies and gentlemen, have a great glimpse of Santa's sleigh. And instead of being pulled by reindeer, they're actually pulled by wolves. And they still have the same names, Comet, Cupid, all that. But yeah, they certainly aren't reindeer. Which I think this harks back to perhaps a more Russian take on the character, when it would have been a sled of dogs to pull it. But of course, being Klaus, he doesn't have just Any dogs, he has wolves. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Klaus, The New Adventures of Santa Claus. I think this book is fantastic. It's a great, wintertime read, but generally it's just a great comic. Please do pick this up at your local comic book store. If they don't have it, I'm sure they can order it. If they don't have that ability, check out your library or, of course, a local bookstore for yourself to be able to keep it and bring it home. That being said, please also go check out the original, just called Klaus, which starts his origin. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. This was Wednesday Night Reviews. Again, I'm Conrad. Go check out Klaus and have a great night.